Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the truly colossal life and staggering legacy of Maya Angelou, a woman born Marguerite Annie Johnson, whose influence just spans continents, literature, civil rights, academia.
Mm.
It's hard to think of a field she didn't touch.
It is an immense body of work. And, her life story is so varied, it often reads like multiple lives stitched together into one.
Right.
And our source material today is really designed to give you a comprehensive look, to trace her path from, well, a traumatic childhood through this remarkable kaleidoscope of careers.
Dancer, singer, activist.
Exactly. All of that right up to her emergence as this internationally celebrated writer, a civil rights icon, and the architect who, you could argue, fundamentally redefined the modern autobiography.
And that's our mission today, really, to trace those radical pivots. Because when you start to catalog her output, the sheer creative energy is, it's just astonishing.
It really is. We're talking about 7 volumes of autobiography. 7. Plus 3 books of essays, multiple poetry collections, and a long list of successful plays, movies, TV shows. It spans over 50 years of just relentless creative work.
And this wasn't just, putting stuff out there. This was output that was recognized at the highest levels of culture and state.
Oh, absolutely. She collected dozens of major awards, humanitarian awards, and was honored with, get this, over 50 honorary degrees throughout her lifetime.
50. That's incredible.
But the foundation, the bedrock for everything we know her for, it really rests on that initial volume, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Published in 1969.
Right. And that book, which chronologically covers her life only up to the age of 17.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. That book is what immediately cemented her place in American letters. It brought her international recognition, and maybe more importantly, it showed that the individual story of a Black woman could be and had to be told with the same high literary craft that was usually reserved for, canonical male writers.
Exactly. Caged Bird is the necessary entry point. But it's the next 6 volumes that really allow us to understand the true scope of her experience.
Yes. The travel, the activism, the mistakes, and the redemption that she explicitly sought to model for her readers. It's all there.
So to really understand the memoirist, a person whose entire career was built on this idea of radical self-revelation, we have to start with the trauma that structured her early life.
We do. Maya Angelou was born Marguerite Annie Johnson in St. Louis, Missouri, April 4th, 1928. Her parents, Bailey Johnson and Vivian Baxter, had what she later called a calamitous marriage.
Calamitous. That's a strong word.
And it was. It ended very quickly. So when Angelou was just 3, she and her older brother, Bailey Jr., he's the one who gave her the lifelong nickname, Maya, were sent alone.
Alone on a train.
Alone on a train to the small, racially segregated town of Stamps, Arkansas. They were sent to live with their paternal grandmother, Annie Henderson, who they called Mama.
In this move from the city to the Deep South, that must have been a foundational life shift.
It was everything. And their grandmother, Mama, she becomes this just astonishing figure of resilience, especially when you think about the time period.
The Great Depression, World War II.
Precisely. Annie Henderson's success was, as the sources note, an astonishing exception to the harsh financial realities facing most African Americans. She owned a general store.
Ms. Ellis.
That's the one. Selling basic necessities, flour, sugar, salted fish. And Angelou wrote so vividly about watching Mama handle the local white customers, just maintaining her dignity and her business at the same time.
How did she do it? I mean, how did she manage to not just survive, but prosper
Yeah.
in a segregated Southern economy?
It came down to just incredible practicality and acumen. She built her business initially with food stalls catering to Black workers who couldn't easily shop anywhere else.
Sure.
Very. And then she parlayed that success into wise and honest investments. She was disciplined, she was shrewd, and she taught Angelou the value of financial independence and self-reliance.
Virtues she definitely carried with her.
Without a doubt. That bedrock of resilience in Stamps gave Angelou a vital template for survival.
But the stability she found in Stamps, it was shattered by a brief and just devastating return to St. Louis when she was 7.
This is where the profound trauma occurs. In 1935, she was back living with her mother. And at the age of 8, Angelou was sexually abused and raped by her mother's boyfriend, a man named Freeman.
And it was her brother Bailey who figured it out.
It was. He recognized what had happened and was the one who bravely told the rest of the family. Freeman was found guilty. He was jailed.
But the legal fallout was minimal, which led to this shocking and violent twist.
It's unbelievable. Freeman was jailed for only 1 day.
1 day.
Just one, and 4 days after his release, he was found murdered. Most biographers conclude he was likely killed by Angelou's uncles.
So you have this sequence. She identifies the abuser, the legal system completely fails, and then this swift, brutal, extra-legal justice happens.
And for an 8-year-old girl, that sequence convinced her of a terrifying connection.
The belief that her voice killed him.
Precisely. The shock of that sudden, fatal power attached to her spoken words led Angelou to internalize the worst possible lesson, that speaking brought destruction. She thought, my voice killed him. I killed that man because I told his name.
That is just an intense, almost impossible burden for an 8-year-old child to carry.
Right.
What was the immediate effect on her?
For almost 5 years, she became functionally mute. She rarely spoke to anyone outside of her immediate family. She said later she was afraid her voice would kill anyone she spoke to.
And yet biographers and scholars agree that this silence was, paradoxically, what formed her as a future writer.
Yes. How does that work? How did that silence actually train her?
Well, by taking away her main way of communicating outward, it forced all her senses inward. It heightened her perception of the world around her. She developed an extraordinary, almost photographic memory.
And she deepened her love for books and literature.
It was her only escape, and she sharpened her observational skills. She became this intense listener and watcher, just soaking up the rhythms of language, the nuances of human behavior.
And that ability to listen and watch, that became foundational to her entire writing process later in life.
So this period of imposed silence, which was fueled by tragedy, ironically becomes the crucible where her literary voice was ultimately forged, silently.
And that voice eventually returned, but it took the intervention of an intellectual mentor to bring it out.
A family friend and teacher, Mrs. Bertha Flowers, back in Stamps.
That's her. Mrs. Flowers essentially offered her a pathway back to language and self-expression. She challenged Angelou to speak again, insisting that you can't truly love poetry until you speak it.
And this wasn't just, some casual reading. It was a rigorous literary introduction.
It was a foundational curriculum. Mrs. Flowers introduced her to this vast array of canonical authors, the European tradition, Charles Dickens, Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe.
But crucially, she also gave her Black female authors.
Yes, exactly. Authors who provided literary models closer to her own experience. Frances Harper, Anne Spencer, Jessie Fawcett. It was a formal, rigorous reclamation of language, showing Angelou that words could build, not just destroy.
So by age 14, 15, she moves again, this time to Oakland, California, with her brother and her mother. And this move leads to her first really astonishing career milestone.
At age 16, Angelou achieved something truly remarkable for a Black teenager in the 1940s. She became the first Black female streetcar conductor in San Francisco.
That is a massive barrier to break. What drove her to seek out that particular job?
It's a wonderful little anecdote. It wasn't about money, not at first. She genuinely wanted the job because she admired the uniforms.
The uniforms.
Yeah. She described the women in uniform as having their little money-changing belts and with bibs on their caps and well-fitted uniforms. It was the dignity and the visible authority of the uniform that appealed to her.
That focus on the aesthetic, the dignity of the role, it's powerful. And the context of pursuing that job in 1940 San Francisco must have been monumental.
It was a huge sociological victory. The job had only recently opened up to women because of World War II labor shortages, but it was still highly resistant to Black employees, especially women.
So she had to fight for it.
Oh, she had to be persistent.
Yeah.
She visited the office daily for weeks, just refusing to leave until they let her submit an application.
And what did her mother say about all this?
Her mother, Vivian Baxter, she encouraged her, but she gave her a clear warning, one that reflects navigating racial barriers in professional life. She told Angelou she would have to arrive early and work twice as hard as anyone else to keep the job.
Wow. And just a couple of years after that, her formative years culminate in another profound shift into adulthood.
At 17, just 3 weeks after completing school, she gave birth to her son, Clyde, who later adopted the name Guy Jesson.
So by 17, she'd navigated profound racial trauma, spent 5 years in silence, gained a rigorous education, broken a significant employment barrier, and entered motherhood.
Her life was already a complete volume before the writing even started.
The next decade, from about 51 to 61, it reads less like a career progression and more like a an explosion of creative energy.
It's a demonstration of radical versatility, really. In 1951, she married Tosh Angelos, a Greek electrician and aspiring musician, and this choice was deeply controversial.
Marrying a white man at that time.
Exactly. It showed her willingness to just defy social norms, despite condemnation, and even her own mother's disapproval. The marriage only lasted until 1954, but it reflects that pattern of risk-taking.
And she initially channeled her creative energy into modern dance.
She did. She took classes and met Alvin Ailey and Ruth Beckford. She and Ailey formed a dance team called Alan Rita.
Alan Rita.
Alan Rita, performing modern dance at Black fraternal organizations around San Francisco. They were dedicated, but, the team never really achieved widespread success.
So dance didn't stick, but the performance bug was definitely there. She pivoted hard into music soon after the marriage dissolved.
She did. After the divorce in '54, she needed to work, and she found success performing in San Francisco clubs like the Purple Onion. She shifted her focus to singing and dancing to Calypso music.
Which was having a moment then, right?
A big moment. And this shift required a redefinition of her public image. This is where Marguerite Johnson dies and Maya Angelou is born.
Right, her managers told her to find a more distinctive name.
Exactly, a name that suited her vibrant Calypso stage presence. So she combined her childhood nickname, Maya, with a modified version of her ex-husband's surname, Angelos. Maya Angelou was a deliberate, career-driven choice.
And that new persona took her, literally, around the world almost immediately.
From 1954 to 1955, she toured Europe and beyond with a State Department-sponsored production of the opera Porgy and Bess. And this tour was critical for her.
How so?
Well, it exposed her to high culture, to international politics, but maybe most importantly, it cemented a lifelong practice, learning the local language of every country she visited.
That's a fascinating habit for a performer. How proficient did she get?
She gained proficiency in several languages over the years: French, Spanish, Italian, Hebrew, Fanti, a major language in Ghana. This commitment to language gave her this unparalleled appreciation for linguistic structure, for cadence, for rhythm.
All of which later infused her prose and poetry.
Without a doubt. The Porgy and Bess tour wasn't just a job, it was an extended, intensive cultural education.
And this Calypso phase peaked with some mainstream success in the late 50s.
Yes. In 1957, capitalizing on the Calypso craze, she recorded her first album, Miss Calypso. She also appeared in a film, Calypso Heatwave, where she sang and performed her own compositions.
But the transition from performer to dedicated writer seems to have been catalyzed by meeting a key literary figure.
It was. In 1959, she met the novelist John Oliver Killens. At his urging, she moved to New York City to focus specifically on writing and just immersed herself in the atmosphere of the Harlem Writers Guild.
What was the Harlem Writers Guild and why was it so important for her?
The Guild was this crucial literary collective. It was a proving ground, a sanctuary for emerging and established African-American authors. It gave her an intellectual home, exposed her to writers like John Henrik Clarke, Rosa Guy.
And that's where she started to move away from performance as her main thing.
Exactly. She started viewing writing itself as a discipline, and this literary shift aligned directly with her deep dive into serious political organizing.
Let's talk about that activism. It quickly became centralized around Martin Luther King Jr.
It did. After meeting King in 1960 and hearing him speak, she and Killens were instrumental in organizing the legendary Cabaret for Freedom,
Which was a fundraiser.
a high-profile fundraiser for King's organization, the SCLC, and she was noted as being eminently effective at it. Her charisma, organizational skills. She was so successful that she was appointed SCLC's Northern Coordinator.
A huge role.
A pivotal role. It positioned her right at the nexus of the growing national movement. But her activism was never purely domestic, was it?
Not at all. She was deeply involved in anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movements. She joined the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, showing solidarity with Fidel Castro.
And famously joined the crowds cheering for him in Harlem in 1960.
She maintained this fierce global perspective on liberation, which would soon take her, literally, overseas.
But before her move to Africa, 1961 saw her make a significant return to the stage.
In a politically charged production.
Jean Genet's play The Blacks, it was this deeply provocative exploration of racial identity and the cast she was in. It was a spectacular collection of future Black cultural icons.
James Earl Jones, Cicely Tyson.
Louis Gossett, Roscoe Lee Brown. An artistic environment just steeped in political consciousness.
And shortly after that, her personal life takes her across the Atlantic. she began a relationship with Vusumzimek, a prominent South African freedom fighter.
That relationship, though it was never a formal marriage, led her and her son to move to Cairo, Egypt. And she took a job there as an associate editor at the Arab Observer.
So she was now working as a journalist.
Rigorously applying her writing and linguistic skills in a professional capacity, reporting on African and Middle Eastern affairs.
But the relationship with Make ended in 1962, and she and her son, Guy, relocated to Accra, Ghana.
Right. And the initial move to Ghana was pragmatic. She wanted Guy to attend college there. But Angelou ended up staying for 3 truly transformative years, partly due to a devastating personal setback.
The car accident involving her son.
Guy was seriously injured in a car accident in Accra. It required a series of complex spinal surgeries. Angelou stayed in Ghana until 1965 to aid his recovery.
And this unexpected stay forced her to integrate fully into the growing expatriate community there.
And she wasn't just sitting around, far from it. She became deeply entrenched in Ghanaian intellectual life. She served as an administrator at the University of Ghana.
And she was still writing.
She was a feature editor for the African Review and a freelance writer and broadcaster for Radio Ghana. This period solidified her global anti-colonial perspective and further refined her journalistic rigor.
Her time in Accra also led to a significant personal and political connection with Malcolm X.
She and Malcolm X became close friends during his visits to Accra, a connection she famously described as a brother-sister relationship. And this bond was the very catalyst for her return to the United States in 1965.
The purpose of that return was to help him build his new civil rights organization.
She returned in early 1965, committed to helping him establish the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU. But within weeks of her arrival, history just struck with a vengeance.
Malcolm X was assassinated.
Shortly after her return, she was devastated. She'd uprooted her life, returned from years abroad based on a mission, only for that mission's leader to be immediately murdered.
She must have felt completely adrift.
She did. She went to Hawaii for a time, tried to resume her singing career briefly. Then she came back to L.A. and worked for a while as a market researcher in Watts, where she witnessed the Watts riots in the summer of 1965.
Just another eruption of American racial turmoil firsthand.
And the political assassinations, the profound personal loss, it just seemed to follow her, culminating in the tragedy of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death.
This was the peak of that trauma-fueled decade. Angelou had postponed organizing a march for King.
And he was assassinated on April 4th, 1968.
Her 40th birthday.
A macabre twist of fate, as one biographer called it. The day meant to celebrate her life was now eternally marked by this national tragedy.
And that pain became such a defining element that she essentially stopped celebrating her own birthday for years.
That's right. For many years after, she would send flowers to Coretta Scott King instead. She sank into a deep, prolonged depression. It was her friend, James Baldwin, who finally helped pull her out of it.
And from that depression, she channeled her energy into a groundbreaking creative project in 1968.
A real turning point. She wrote, produced, and narrated a 10-part documentary series called Blacks, Blues, Black for National Educational Television, the precursor to PBS.
What was the focus of that documentary?
It specifically explored the relationship between blues music and the African heritage of Black Americans. She used the series to demonstrate the enduring presence of Africanism still current in the U.S.
Because she's connecting the music directly back to African oral tradition.
Exactly. This project allowed her to synthesize her performance background, her academic interest in African culture, and her deep understanding of American history.
And then came the legendary challenge that shifted her focus from documentary to memoir.
It happened at a dinner party in 1968. She was there with Baldwin, the cartoonist Jules Feiffer, and his wife. And Angelou was just regaling the table with anecdotes from her life.
And her editor at Random House, Robert Loomis, was there.
He was listening intently. Loomis had already tried and failed to convince her to write an autobiography.
So how did he finally do it?
He used reverse psychology.
Yeah.
He dared her to write an autobiography that was so artfully crafted, so deeply insightful, that it would be considered high art.
A challenge.
He knew that Angelou's pride, her artistic standards, her competitive spirit, she wouldn't be able to resist a challenge like that, and it worked.
And that dare, that resistance, it shaped how she approached the text.
It drove her to treat the material not as a simple recitation of facts, but as a piece of literature. She approached it with the same rigorous attention to structure, dialogue, characterization, and theme that she had admired in Dickens and Shakespeare.
I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, published in 1969.
And it brought her immediate international recognition. And importantly, it validated Loomis's challenge that a personal Black narrative could and should be viewed as high art.
Once Caged Bird made her famous, her career didn't settle down, it just kept expanding exponentially. The 1970s saw her break new ground in cinema.
She became a true pioneer in film. In 1972, she wrote the screenplay for Georgia.
Which was filmed in Sweden.
Right, and this made her the first produced screenwriter who was an African-American woman. A monumental achievement in an industry notoriously closed to women of color. And she composed the soundtrack, too.
Just showing off at that point.
Basically. And she maintained her connection to the theater, returning to her acting roots.
Yes, in 1973, she earned a Tony Award nomination for her performance in the play Look Away.
And of course, she reached massive television audiences in 1977, appearing in a supporting role in the seminal miniseries Roots,
which fundamentally reshaped how Americans viewed slavery in history.
It's incredible how much she achieved in just that one decade. As one source noted, by the late 1970s, she had accomplished more than many artists hoped to achieve in a lifetime. She was a composer writing for Roberta Flack.
A celebrated poet, a playwright.
Yeah.
And she was beginning her tenure as a professor.
Amidst all this, she navigated another significant relationship. She married a Welsh carpenter, Paul Dufair.
The former husband of the feminist writer Germaine Greer.
That's the one. The marriage ended in 1981, but it speaks to her continued willingness to cross cultural boundaries in her personal life.
The late 70s also marked the beginning of perhaps her most famous relationship, the lifelong mentorship with Oprah Winfrey.
They met when Oprah was a TV anchor in Baltimore, and Angelou quickly became her close friend and lifelong spiritual and intellectual guide.
A profound relationship.
Built on mutual respect. Angelou dedicated her 1993 book of essays to Winfrey. Oprah frequently cited Angelou's influence on her personal philosophy, her career choices. It was a massive, massive friendship.
Her most stable professional identity, and maybe her most surprising, given her lack of a formal degree, came in the 1980s when she deliberately returned to the American South.
She returned in 1981. She said she felt compelled to physically return to the South to confront and reconcile with her past. And then, in 1982, she accepted the Lifetime Reynolds Professorship of American Studies at Wake Forest University.
A lifetime professorship without a bachelor's degree. That is highly unusual.
It underscored the unique weight and cultural capital she carried. Her vast, self-directed education, her global experience, her status as an author of high art, all of that was considered far more valuable than a traditional academic credential.
And from that point on, she considered her core identity to be a teacher who writes.
Rather than a writer who occasionally taught. And her teaching wasn't just confined to literature, was it?
Not at all. Her courses reflected the incredible breadth of her intellectual curiosity. She taught philosophy, ethics, theology, science, theater, writing.
She was known for being intensely multidisciplinary, using poetry to explain ethical dilemmas or literature to explore theological concepts.
But despite her unique value, she still faced some criticism from inside academia.
She certainly did. Some felt her celebrity overshadowed her scholarship. The Winston-Salem Journal reported that some people thought she was more of a celebrity than an intellect or an overpaid figurehead.
Criticism that often came from traditional academics who, maybe failed to appreciate her non-traditional path.
I think that's right. Yet she maintained that post for decades, continuing to teach until shortly before she passed.
She continued to break ground in film later in life, finally achieving a directing goal.
In 1996, she directed her first and only feature film, Down in the Delta. This fulfilled a long-held ambition and solidified her achievement as the first African-American woman to direct a major motion picture.
But for a poet and activist, her commercial ventures in the new millennium, like that Hallmark collection, raised some eyebrows.
That Hallmark line, which started in 2000, greeting cards, decorative household items with her verse on them. Many critics and purists questioned the commercialization of her art.
How did she justify it?
Her defense was staunch and brilliant. She positioned it as an act of accessibility, arguing she was in keeping with her role as the people's poet. She insisted that art shouldn't be restricted to ivory towers or expensive hardbacks.
She said, "I write for money."
Quoting Balzac, for her, reaching people where they shopped was just as valid as lecturing in a university hall.
And her public appeal just skyrocketed thanks to her political visibility, starting with Bill Clinton's inauguration in 1993.
The recitation of her poem, On the Pulse of Morning, was a watershed moment. She was the first poet invited to recite at an inauguration since Robert Frost in 1961.
And that performance earned her a Grammy and broadened her appeal across racial, economic, and educational boundaries.
The immediate impact on her sales was massive, a 1,200% increase in sales in 1 month. Random House had to scramble to reprint 400,000 copies of her books. She had transitioned from being a literary icon to a public prophet.
And she maintained this moral authority well into her 80s, even using her clout to ensure historical accuracy.
Yes, challenging the interpretation of another civil rights icon.
In 2011, she was outspokenly critical of a paraphrase of a Martin Luther King Jr. quote on his memorial in D.C.
She said the truncated quote made Dr. King look like an arrogant twit.
That's direct. And her demand was successful, wasn't it?
It was. They removed the paraphrase. It showed her voice still carried immense political weight, capable of changing physical monuments based on moral principle.
So the true monument to her is, of course, her 7 volumes of autobiography. Let's just quickly review the chronology.
Okay. I Know Why the Caged Bird sings in '69, covering her life up to age 17. The second volume, Gather Together in My Name, is notable because it unflinchingly included painful details of her time working in the sex trade.
Which was a radical act for a public figure at the time. What was her philosophy for sharing those details?
It was central to her idea of truth-telling and growth. She wanted to show young people that you can make mistakes, that you can forgive yourself and move forward to live productive, ethical lives. It was autobiography as a lesson in redemption.
The third volume, Singin' and Swingin' and Getting Merry Like Christmas, was significant simply because it existed.
Exactly. It marked the first time a well-known African-American autobiographer had published a third volume. It showed her commitment to this ongoing, expansive narrative.
And then came the volumes reflecting her international and political years.
The Heart of a Woman, All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes, detailing her time in Ghana. After a long gap, a song flung up to heaven, covering the devastating years of 65 to 68.
And finally, at age 85 in 2013, she published Mom and Me and Mom, focusing on her complex relationship with her mother, Vivian Baxter.
Right.
Moving from the content to the craft, her writing ritual is one of the most famous in modern literature. It speaks to a need for total mental isolation.
The process was unwavering. She would wake early, check into a hotel room, never wrote at home, instructed staff to remove all pictures from the walls.
And she wrote on yellow legal pads.
While lying on the bed, her only companions were a deck of cards for solitaire, a bottle of sherry, Roget's Thesaurus, and the Bible.
Solitaire and sherry. It sounds less like a writer's room and more like a carefully constructed psychological containment zone. What was the purpose of this regimen?
She called the process enchanting herself. It wasn't just about concentration, it was about psychological transportation. She did it to relive the agony, the anguish, the Sturm und Drang of the time she was writing about.
She had to emotionally reenact the pain to tell the human truth.
That was the goal. The solitaire and sherry were tools to unlock the mental doors. The sherry provided a gentle disinhibition, lowering the guard against painful memories. The solitaire kept the conscious mind occupied, allowing the subconscious memories to bubble up.
And this intentional shaping of memory leads directly to the core critical point about her work. Its classification as autobiographical fiction.
This is a vital distinction. Her books are classified this way because she used sophisticated literary techniques, dramatized dialogue, characterization, plot development, to convey an emotional and representative truth.
Even if the factual sequence was slightly adjusted for narrative power.
Exactly. It wasn't about lying. It was about conveying a deeper truth. She was critiquing and expanding the genre itself.
And structurally, her writing is placed within the African-American oral tradition.
Her prose is fundamentally musical and oral. She explicitly stated she followed the slave narrative tradition of speaking in the first-person singular, talking about the first-person plural, always saying I, meaning we.
Her story as representative of the collective Black experience.
Especially that of Black women. She uses testimony, irony, rhythm. It's all deeply connected to the blues and jazz tradition.
Now let's address the critical reception, which is strikingly split. Her prose is foundational, yet her poetry often faces intense academic scrutiny.
That dual profile is fascinating. While she was publicly lauded as the Black woman's poet laureate, her poetry carries very little critical esteem in high academic circles.
Why is that distinction so sharp?
A large part of it is historical academic bias against poetry that's heavily rooted in the performance or oral tradition. Many critics emphasized that her electrifying public performances enhanced her poems, suggesting the written text alone lacked the complexity they preferred.
So they separated popular poetry from high art poetry.
Pretty much. But her defenders point out that this criticism misses her actual goal. She sought to be representative rather than individual, authoritative rather than confessional. She was writing for the community first.
Beyond the critics, her work has faced immense public controversy, making Caged Bird one of the most challenged books in the United States.
It remains a lightning rod for censorship. It was third on the ALA's list of most challenged books of the 1990s. The objections are generally centered on its unflinching honesty.
The depictions of violence, the frank sexuality, the language.
The irreverent depictions of religion. The fact that it's so frequently challenged really speaks to the revolutionary nature of her truth-telling. She forced the American literary public to confront parts of the Black female experience that had previously been confined to silence.
And that unflinching honesty is what defined her legacy. She transcended the role of writer to become a cultural spokesperson.
She was hailed as a new kind of memoirist. Scholar Hilton Alsa argued that her work allowed Black autobiographers to write about Blackness from the inside. This radical self-revelation was instrumental in fueling the increase in Black feminist writings in the 1970s.
Her position as a spokesperson meant her work functioned as a cultural defense for the Black community.
Absolutely. Her autobiographies served as powerful narratives designed to combat negative stereotypes by presenting a nuanced, complex, and resilient view of Black life.
And this universal application makes her work a powerful tool in education, despite the attempts at banning it.
It's used widely in schools and universities. Professors use Caged Bird to train teachers in how to effectively talk about race in the classroom.
It's also a highly effective psychological teaching tool.
Yes, psychologists use it to supplement instruction in child development. The book provides highly effective, real-life examples of resiliency, the effects of abuse, identity formation. It provides the narrative texture that dry theory often lacks.
The list of honors she accumulated is just staggering. Let's recap those high points.
It's an unparalleled honors roll. A Pulitzer Prize nomination for poetry in '71, 3 Grammy Awards for her spoken word albums.
Including On the Pulse of Morning.
That's right. And then the government recognition. The Spingarn Medal, the National Medal of Arts, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2011 from President Obama.
And posthumously, in 2022, she became the first Black woman depicted on the reverse of the U.S. quarter.
An incredible symbol. And her influence isn't just in the past, it extends directly into modern music and pop culture.
The hip-hop community.
Absolutely. We see elements of her poetry structure and testimony in the work of artists like Kanye West, Tupac Shakur, and Nicki Minaj.
And her process is preserved for future study, thanks to the vast collection of her papers at the Schomburg Center.
Over 340 boxes, including the famous handwritten notes on yellow legal pads for Caged Bird, so scholars can study her rigorous process for generations.
And she maintained that fierce intellectual focus right up until the end of her life.
Maya Angelou died on May 28, 2014, at age 86. Though she was in poor health, her mind remained sharp. She was actively working on an 8th autobiography when she passed.
Her son, Guy Johnson, noted that her mental acuity was undiminished.
He spoke about how, despite constant physical struggle, she wrote 4 books in the last 10 years of her life and left with no loss of acuity and no loss in comprehension. Tributes poured in from around the world.
And the cultural response was immediate. The week after her death, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings rose to #1 on Amazon's bestseller list,
confirming the timeless, enduring power of her story. If we synthesize her entire life and work, the core message is one of profound survival with grace and faith. Her work is about admitting pain and finding relief, not by avoiding it, but by subjecting it to the rigorous discipline of art and telling the truth.
Her greatest precedent was demonstrating how radical self-revelation, achieved through meticulous craft, could transform the autobiography into this powerful political and cultural defense.
Speaking for the dignity of a community while simultaneously unveiling the self.
And that rigorous dedication is what sticks with me. Checking into that silent hotel room, with only solitaire and sherry to unlock the past, making her writing process a necessary emotional ritual. Angelou wrote that she would make writing as much a part of her life as eating or listening to music. So for you, our listener, given her insistence on honesty as a catalyst for growth and her commitment to accessing painful memories through rigorous dedication and craft, what aspect of your own past, if shared with that level of dedicated self-enchantment, holds the greatest potential for universal insight? Think about that commitment to honesty as you go about your day.